Danganronpa has its fair share of protagonists, and you can start a whole war in the comments by pitting them against each other. You can, but you shouldn't. Don't do that, please. And I do admit I have favorites, and I have a tier list for them inside my own head, but that's an expected outcome. We're bound to rank characters and bond with some over others. Just because I like one more doesn't mean they don't all have their own importance. So let's go protagonist by protagonist, and talk about their needed roles within their own games and Danganronpa franchise as a whole. Of course, we have to start with our first plain boy Makoto, which is personally my favorite. I don't know, there's just something lovable about him. While he is the most plain out of the bunch, he is the most important. Which isn't my bias speaking, he sets a lot of events into motion and influences those around him. But before we get to that, let's shoot back to the beginning, shall we? Danganronpa Trigger Happy is known as being the most relatable and realistic, which is why the protagonist has to be a bit more realistic. But not just that, he's a stand-in for us, which happens in a lot of games. You often have a plain or boring protagonist so that the player can grab a hold of something. We're surrounded by murder and outlandish personalities. You're supposed to find comfort in Makoto because he's the most like us than any of the protagonists. And I don't mean that in a kidding sense, I mean that as an outsider. He starts out with no talent and has just won a lottery, which realistically any of us could do. We don't need to be a detective, we don't need to be a pro gambler, or have any of the other talents. We just need a little luck from time to time. He's not some brilliant mastermind or amazing detective. He relies on people and lets people rely on him. That's also things we could do and should do. You should go to people for help, and you should help others. When he's solving cases and in trials, it's connections that we could make as well given the resources. Don't believe me? Well, you played and beat the trial, right? There you go. For those wise guys typing frantically right now that you watched a Let's Play, did you guess during it? Did you guess right? Even if you didn't, you were engaged and relied on the Let's Player to help you, didn't you? Just consider that Let's Player your Kirigiri. Makoto is our first and helps us get used to this weird environment of the game we love. He's also used a lot later on because we have that level of comfortability with him. There's something we don't understand. Oh look, Makoto's here. Without you knowing it, he's helped ground the game. And so you can have that unpredictable thing thrown at you and still be able to connect because you have something to hold on to. Now we move on to Hajime, who is a mix of Makoto and Kaede. While you might be confused about my latter comparison, it's quite simple. Both Kaede and Hajime kinda betray us. One with good intentions, the other unknowingly. You consider Hajime bland because of the lack of talent, but I will admit the man is snarky and has a bit more personality than Makoto. Well, better phrasing would be he can be less based. And no, I'm not talking about in a meme sense. I'm literally talking about how Makoto was a base for all of us to build off of. The less he shows, the more we can see ourselves in him. He's the safe base. Now, Hajime is still that, but in a lesser sense. I believe he's the sample of the team trying to practice with expanding their protagonist personalities, and to the extent they can bring it. If they give him more traits, or he's more of his own character, is he still relatable? And yes, I would say he is. I think he's the perfect blend of relatable and being able to stand on his own. But that's not his only purpose as a protagonist. His job is to make us question what is presented to us, which leaks into V3. We have been on this journey with him this whole time, and yet he was the cause of everything happening. There were so many things about him we had no idea of. All the information we had was presented to us, and we put total trust into it. He's the evidence that we need to question everything Danganronpa does. We can't even trust our own protagonist. And this lesson is amplified when the fake Makoto happens. Can't even trust your base, apparently. But just because we can't completely trust him, it doesn't mean we can't empathize and continue with him on his journey. We just have to come to terms with what happened, matching the character development of Hajime. Ha ha ha, all this time you've been Hajime, you fools. Now you didn't think I was going to forget Komaru, did you? Of course not, she's a protagonist still. But I hate to admit, her role in this video isn't as long as her brother's. Her role as a protagonist is actually quite simple and deeply mirrors Makoto's. This is the first game where we have a different playstyle and mechanics. It's a huge change, so to combat that, we've switched back to the base phrase. So the shock isn't too huge on the player. Which is why Toko as a support and Tagami in the opening is a smart idea. We will 1. Be more invested in the characters we already know, and their families, so we're more likely to play the game despite the change. And 2, we have more anchors to hold onto throughout this change. Not only does she come off as an easy base, arguably more of a base than Makoto, a core part of us knowing her is she is Makoto's sister. We have that level of familiarity, I'm sorry, because of Makoto. That word, man. Sorry to say, but that's all I got for her. And now we move on to the double protags of V3, Kaede and Shuichi. Kaede, as said before, has a similar role to Hajime. This is to enforce us to question everything. Hers is more extreme, I would say. Hajime, he was unaware that he had been the cause of everything, and his actions occurred before we started following him. Now Kaede, she did this all while we were watching her. We basically watched and helped her kill Rantaro, which is where Shuichi comes into play. We are Shuichi in this situation. We were there when it happened and helped provide her with the tools. Kaede also has far more of a jarring presence than Hajime. Yes, Hajime did this and that, but he survived at the end. The same can't be said for Kaede, and that left an impression. No one is safe. Not even our dear protagonist. I would say Shuichi is some of the most realistic emotionally wise. I know some people call him a baby or sensitive, but honestly, how would you react in a murder game? I know I would crumble quickly. I can't even stand blood. He helps us, the audience, get more in touch with our emotions. And personally, my second favorite protagonist. The protagonists can be similar, but they all do exist for their own reasons. And I think that's neat. Of course, there's more to all of them than what I put here, and all deserve the praise they receive. Now, who's your favorite protagonist? Also, sorry for the whack upload schedule, uni and then break, and I was flying out of state. Shit's crazy, shit's wild. Hope you're all doing okay. Love you.